card I've needed to buy but doesn't exist. Congratulations on your engagement and your upcoming wedding. If you decide to go through with it. I mean, there is still plenty of time to back out, so are you sure? Blessings. I wish that this card and so many others existed because it is so rare in life that you get to be who you are and say what you mean to say. For instance, when my friend invited me to her bachelorette party, and the invitation said that I should bring a pair of panties that represented my relationship with the bride. What I said was, can't wait. And what I meant was, kill me. I might have had a better attitude about this whole thing if this hadn't been the same month that Will and I were supposed to get married. I had a Pinterest board to plan it, which is how you know it's real. Which is funny, because growing up, I never really wanted to get married. Every Disney movie I loved growing up ended with a wedding, and I think in my mind, I sort of assumed that your life ended when you got married. And many of the marriages at which I have been a bridesmaid have not disproved this theory. But then I met Will, and I thought, maybe getting married wouldn't be so bad. And by then, everyone else was married or getting divorced from their first marriages, and I started to feel a little bit behind. And yet, between the pinning of the plumeria flower bouquets and this bachelorette party, I had found texts on his phone from another woman. At this point, we had been together for 8 years, 2 of which were great, and 2 of which were and 4 of which were dig in with your fingernails and make this work, because spinsterhood's a-coming. Hallmark card I've needed to buy that doesn't exist. We've been unhappy together for a long time, but not getting you a card would be like a statement, and I'm not sure I'm ready to open that can of worms yet. So please accept this lukewarm card with a duck on it in place of me putting any actual emotional work into this relationship. Happy anniversary. I didn't break up with him the night I found the texts, just like I hadn't broken up with him every night for the last 4 years, even though I'd thought about it every night for the last 4 years. I think he had too, but I was pretty sure we could work this out. He was sorry, this other girl meant nothing to him, and I was a gazelle, a 36-year-old gazelle, and everyone had convinced me that the bobcat of old maidhood was closing the gap. One more lunge and she would take me down. Do bobcats eat gazelle? Am I not a gazelle? Am I some kind of weasel? The night after I found the texts, I had to leave on a 2-week work trip to Seattle to attend rehearsals and opening nights for a play that I had written. And I told him that if he wanted to be with me, he needed to prove it. And in my mind, I made a list of all the grand gestures he might undertake in order to do this, while knowing, deep down, he wouldn't do any of them. On the plane ride to Seattle, I turned the situation over and over in my mind. I knew that any self-respecting weasel in my shoes would end this relationship. But I decided that I needed a sign. You know, beyond the other woman and being generally unhappy for as long as I could remember. So I closed my eyes to conjure the mental image of what it would be not to be in this relationship anymore. And the image that came to me was a red balloon. A red balloon floating up, happy, free, into the sky. And I resolved that if I were to see a red balloon at any point over the 2 weeks of this trip, that would be my sign that I should break up with him. Now, I put a lot of very logical parameters around this because this whole idea was extremely logical. And I needed to make sure that if I saw a red balloon, it was for real. I couldn't risk screwing up my life over logistics. So the rules were: 1, it had to be red. 2, I had to see it during the 2 weeks of this trip. I couldn't see a blue balloon 9 years from now and be like, peace out. 3, no balloons on posters or on TV. It had to be a real-life red balloon. And I figured that in order to be fair in this entirely logical universe, I also needed a sign that I should stay. And so I closed my eyes to conjure the image of what it would be to stay in this relationship. And the image that came to me was, I kid you not, a dirty pile of rope. A dirty pile of rope that I was going to work to clean up and untangle and make into a decent rope again. And yes, I am aware of how loaded these images are, of how the answer seems clear just from what image presented itself for each option. But I don't think that science or medicine or art or poetry have ever found a way to explain the lethal cocktail that is mixed between your head and your heart when you are terrified that nobody will ever love you. And a dirty pile of rope is offering to love you. So I landed in Seattle and I set off on my search. Eyes to the sky for the red balloon, eyes to the ground for the dirty pile of rope. And then I found it. Off on a walk one day, I looked down and I saw a red balloon. But this was not the red balloon I had been imagining. This one was popped. It was ripped and dirty and shriveled and had a logo for some kind of realty firm on it. It wasn't on a string, it was on a stick. And I stood there and I looked at it. And I examined it. And I picked it up. I'm not sure how long I stood there looking at it, but long enough for a man in a passing car to yell, "Were you okay?" as I stood there on the side of the road. And I guess it's not every day that you see a grown woman standing on the side of the road holding a popped balloon as if it were an oracle. And I wanted to scream back, "Excuse me, sir, but this balloon has the answer to the rest of my life." I didn't know what to do. Was this my red balloon? I had made many specific stipulations about my red balloon, but I hadn't made any rules about what it needed to look like when I found it. What was the universe saying? You asked for a red balloon, and I sent you one. Here's your sign. Or, this will be your life if you leave him, not free and floating and happy, but ripped and shriveled and sad. Or, woman up and make your own decisions. Here's enough of a sign to get you to do what you already know you should do, but not so much of a sign that you can blame the universe and not yourself if you don't like the outcome. Or, there was an open house 3 days ago, and that is the entire significance of this balloon. When I got back home, I found out that his grand gesture was getting me a mini Polaroid camera and a photo display board that had "Count Your Blessings" painted across the top, on which he had posted a photo of himself. So, we had broken up. Brief summary of dates I've been on lately. The conversation on this date has revolved mostly around property taxes, which means I haven't spoken at all because I know and care nothing about property taxes. And I am somehow talked into walking across the Brooklyn Bridge with him. And as we're walking across the bridge, I can tell that he is feeling romantic. And I keep my hands in my pockets as a sign to him that I am not into this. And about halfway across the bridge, he reaches over into my pocket and pulls my hand out to hold his hand on the bridge. I don't want to claim pocket rape, but like pocket rape. Date 2. He says, "So, do you like to go by Jen or Jenny?" And I say, "Either one, but usually Jenny." Calls me Janet for the rest of the night. I don't know why I said either one, actually. I never go by Jen. I always go by Jenny. Back when I was starting my writing career, I thought maybe I would go by Jennifer. But then I did a quick Google search and found out that there's another Jennifer Stafford who's going to pop up before me every time. She's a dominatrix. No, a dominatrix. Based on a quick and timid Google search, she wears like black leather held together by knitted bodices, and she knits sexy things. Her tagline is Jennifer Stafford, dominatrix. Whip your knitting into shape. She published a book I've always been too scared to look at. She has a website that I was too scared to visit because there are some things you cannot unsee. Like a dominatrix wearing a knit thong while she straddles a guy and strangles him with circular knitting needles. I imagined. But in truth, there was part of me that was jealous of the dominatrix. And not just because she could keep a knit and a purl straight. She had my exact same name, but she seemed to be living a much more interesting life with it. I looked at her photos and she seemed so bold and brave and fearless. She was all confidence and attitude. She'd had a dream to publish a naughty knitting book. Super weird. And she had made it come true without worrying what anybody thought about her. As a young, self-conscious writer, I was constantly worried about what everyone thought of me. I looked at her and I saw so much of what I wished I could be, but was too afraid to pursue. Without the S&M part. So I decided I wouldn't go by Jennifer Stafford for my writing because that name was taken by a badass bitch who did what she wanted. I would go by Jenny. Not Jen. And not Janet. I certainly could have used the dominatrix's help when it came time for this bachelorette party and choosing a pair of panties that represented my relationship with the bride. These panties were a real debacle. I don't enjoy choosing another woman's panties because basically you're being asked to guess what kind of girl your friend is in bed. Is she a sweet, soft, Teddy kind of girl? Is she a leather-strapped Fredericks of Hollywood, crotchless, see-through leotard kind of girl? There's no way to know. And there's nothing worse than being at the party and seeing lacy pink matching sets come out of innocent floral bags and realizing you got it wrong. And your raunchy selection is 3 bags away and is filled with penis confetti that is going to go everywhere. And now there's a new stipulation. It has to represent my relationship with the bride. What did this mean? Was she supposed to think of me when she put it on? Was she supposed to think of me when her new husband removed it with his teeth? In the end, I sweated out in Target for an agonizing 20 minutes before a male colleague from work walked by. We made horrific but undeniable eye contact as I stood there clutching fistfuls of panties varying in sluttiness. In the end, I just threw everything back on the shelf, chose the most neutral black cotton panties I could find, and ran for the suburbs. I arrived at the party, and the room laid out its cards. Besides the bride, I didn't know anyone. 2 women had brought their babies. 2 women were visibly pregnant, and all but one young woman was married. And we started the evening with the ever popular bachelorette party game, which birthing strategy do you prefer? Hallmark card I've needed to buy but doesn't exist. Congratulations on your baby. So I guess I'm never seeing you again, huh? Babies are a miracle. I don't have children. I don't want children. I've never really wanted children. Will wanted children. But it still feels odd to me when new people ask me if I have kids and I say no, and the conversation screeches to a halt like the ending jolts on a roller coaster. Luckily, the conversation eventually came around to something I could actually contribute to, which is that I'm a playwright and I wouldn't be able to attend the wedding because I'd be doing a writing residency in Maine. I do a lot of writing residencies. Will met the other woman while I was out of town at a residency. They met at a small group gathering where he was complaining about how I prioritize my career over him and how I travel too much working on my shows. I was so used to the news of my residencies being met with anger and resentment that when the women at the party responded with, "Wow, congratulations, that's amazing," it did feel like a small consolation prize for not having a preferred birthing strategy. Megan, the youngest woman at the party, the only other single girl there, seemed especially excited about it. And she came and sat next to me and told me about all the theater she had done in high school and how desperately she had wanted to go into professional theater, but she was afraid. And so she had just graduated with a degree in elementary education and she was teaching 2nd grade. And she said, "I'll probably still get to do drama with the kids sometimes." The unwrapping of the panties wasn't as bad as I feared. Danielle, the clear life of the party, exclaimed, "I got you this matching panty set covered in margaritas because remember that time we had all those margaritas?" Anna, who may have been the actual embodiment of Charlotte from Sex and the City, said, "We both like flowers, so I got you this nightie covered in flowers." It seems like the other women at the party had struggled with this assignment as much as I had, and I was thankfully spared from having to explain my plain black cotton panties when Hannah, an older, slightly odd outsider in the group, had accompanied her panties with a jumbo Ziploc bag labeled "Practical Sex Things You'll Need." Wipes to clean up, a detergent that is the best at getting stains out of your sheets, a douche. The fun, sexy vibe of the moment was over, and the group of women adjourned to the deck to make s'mores. Megan walked with me to the campfire, and I was explaining to her why Sweeney Todd, a musical about a vengeful barber who murders everyone, is my favorite musical. But the campfire had thrown my mind back to all the nights I had spent with Will at Lake George camping and making s'mores by the fire and being genuinely happy. And I wondered how long it would take until every little thing didn't remind me of some moments with him. Brief summary of dates I've been on lately. He is my first date after breaking up with Will, and we go to a Christmas tree lighting. And I am a wreck the whole time because all I can think about is how much fun this event would have been with Will. and we go on a hayride. And as we're riding, he tells me that he was engaged once 15 years ago, but that his fiancée died in a car wreck while he was serving overseas in Iraq. And right as he finishes telling me that, he leans in to kiss me. And in the 3 seconds that he is leaning in, I am a mix of shock and sympathy for him, but also missing will and not being sure I want to kiss this new person and not in front of all these people. But I also don't want to reject him after he just shared something so vulnerable, which is maybe just the move he makes on women so that they will kiss him, and I freeze. And I let him kiss me. And I wish I hadn't. But in reality, the 3 seconds between when someone is leaning in to kiss you and is actually kissing you is not enough time to process everything that is happening to you. I was brought back to the campfire by life of the party, Danielle, telling us how much babies love her face. She told us every baby she meets is just obsessed with her funny face. While the actual babies at the party, because there were babies at the party, could not have been less interested in her face. From what I could tell, Danielle was one of the only women who didn't have children. Anna, aka Charlotte, must have said, "Trenton won't let me," 3 times that night, referring to her husband. Someone would say, "Is that a new tattoo?" And she would say, "Oh, no, it's a stamp from an amusement park. I would love to get a new tattoo, but Trenton won't let me." Hannah remained an odd outsider to the group after her traumatizing sex bag, and she brought out some knitting and started working on a blanket. And she left without saying goodbye to anyone. No one seemed to notice when she left. Megan sat next to me and continued to pepper me with questions about working in theater and tell me how much she had wanted to work in theater, but it's so unstable. But her parents hadn't wanted her to. But teaching 2nd grade was nice too. But. We actually had a lovely conversation by the fire where she did not once ask me if I was single, and I didn't ask her. That wasn't the part of each other's lives that we were interested in. Brief summary of dates I've been on lately. His name was Mike Castellano. And before the date, I Googled him to make sure he wasn't a murderer and found out he was a murderer. But a different Mike Castellano. I'm still alive, so far, so good. I felt really bad for this guy, though, thinking about how many dates he's probably lost because someone Googled him and thinks he's a murderer. Then I wondered how many dates I've lost because someone Googled me and thinks I'm a dominatrix. Actually, I wonder how many dates I've gotten because somebody Googled me and thinks I'm a dominatrix. It actually made me realize how little I knew about her after surrendering my name to her 10 years ago and being too afraid to look into any of her work. And I thought, hey, I'm not the girl I was 10 years ago. I'm ready to see a dungeon full of men tied up with scarves that are even down both sides. A feat I have never accomplished, the even knitting or the dungeon full of men. And I thought, hey, I'm a grown-up lady now. I can hack it. And after 10 years of living in her shadow, I clicked on her website. And I was met with a blog post from 2011 entitled, "What Happened Here?" It was explaining why she'd been absent on her blog for so long. And it said that she had thought that when she published her book, it would take her knitting career to new heights of fame and fortune, and that hadn't been the case. But instead, she found that the thing that she loved had been turned into a commodity. I just wasn't having fun anymore, she wrote. In addition to this, she still had a day job in IT, and her boss had been really nice about giving her time off work to work on her book, but now she had to go back to work and she didn't have as much time for her knitting. In addition to this, she had sustained a wrist injury from repetitive motion from knitting. Okay, 10 years ago me would have scoffed at the idea of a knitting injury. Current me knows that, damn, you can hurt yourself doing anything. One wrong jump to sheep bangs can unravel your entire life. So, she had taken some time off from being the dominatrix to heal and restore her love of knitting. I was shocked. My badass superhero that I'd surrendered my name to was exactly like me. Now I knew 3 things about her, and I saw more than just my identical name reflected back at me. 1, she had thought that publishing her book would take her career to new heights of fame and fortune. I know what it is to hang your hat on your career and to have one moment of wild success that you were sure was going to turn your life around, and then go back to your day job. 2, like her, I know what it is to have your art co-opted into joyless business transactions. I was once hired to ghostwrite a musical that was essentially a knockoff of The Lion King. And I asked the artistic director, "Isn't this illegal?" And he said, "Please, Disney doesn't have a monopoly on stories about lions whose fathers die." I was pretty sure Disney did have a monopoly on the idea for Hamlet with lions, but I was broke and I wrote it and I ate and I paid my rent. And by the way, they made me end it exactly like Disney did. It had a male protagonist, so it didn't end with a wedding. It ended with him stepping into the fullness of who he is. 3, the dominatrix had her life upended by a knitting injury, and I, too, know what it is to have an injury define your life. After blowing out my knee at the gym in 2015, my life was completely derailed for 2 years while doctors couldn't figure out how to fix it. I lived in Manhattan at the time, and Will used to get up at 5 a.m. and drive me to work so that I could avoid the subway with my crutches. But even so, I couldn't handle life in New York City with subway stairs and walking city blocks. And that one injury had a domino effect into a completely different life. Boom, I live in a different city. Boom, I have a different job. Boom, I have a different body. Boom, now I have to travel a lot to New York to work on my shows. Boom, the other woman. Boom, I'm at this bachelorette party. I can trace all of it back to deciding to take a Zumba class one day 5 years ago. The Jennifer Staffords who had seemed so different to me when I was younger now seemed exactly the same. I looked around the party at this group of women, and I knew that my bad attitude about this party had nothing to do with them. Okay, it had very little to do with them. See, I had arrived at this party feeling insecure about being in my 30s, suddenly single, in a room full of women on a different ladder. Because see, it's always felt to me like you have to pick. Like you can pick the marriage and family ladder, or you can pick the career ladder. And I know there are lots of women who do both, but that seems less like a third separate option and more like just having to Spider-Man yourself between the 2 existing ladders, because the world doesn't really seem to allow for a third ladder. And being childless and single didn't really bother me personally. It was the optics that bothered me. Because in a way, it kept me on the lowest rung behind all the other women for my age. And all of the feminism and writing residencies in the world do not erase that deeply ingrained systemic feeling of being inferior for not having something that you didn't really want in the first place. Hallmark card I've needed to buy but doesn't exist. Congratulations on your promotion, you boss bitch. And thank God you got it, right? Because, you made your choices, if you know what I mean. And this promotion is proof that your life is still worth something. Congrats. I looked around at the women at this party, and I knew that not only had I arrived feeling insecure about my own career and no family ladder, I'd arrived judgmental of their family ladders. But as I sat here, I realized that even all the women on the same ladder seemed to be alienated by whatever rung they were on. Danielle was married, but she didn't have any children. And her desperation to make sure that all the babies at the party liked her just reeked of her obsession to make it to the next rung. Anna was married with children, but with all of her Trenton won't let me's, her spot on the ladder felt like a place you didn't really want to get to, that she hadn't wanted to get to. And Hannah, who by all accounts had achieved everything we were all supposed to be striving for, had now gone too far past that, into the place of being the old dowdy wife and mom who ruins the fun at the bachelorette party with her Ziploc bag of practicality. She had achieved it all, but she wasn't young or fun or sexy anymore, so she, too, was alienated. The only person who was winning, I guess, was the bride. Because falling in love and getting engaged is supposed to be the epitome of the female experience. That's why they make so many movies about it. But even her success was temporary. 10 minutes after her wedding, she would be on that next rung, once again insufficient, while everybody asks her when she's having kids. I sat there eating my s'more, and I realized that being single wasn't a reason to feel insecure. My career wasn't a reason to feel secure. It didn't matter. Everyone here was insecure. The dominatrix had been insecure. Even Megan, my little theater friend, was insecure. She wanted to be on my ladder, but she was too afraid to go for it. And as long as we're defined by our ladders, insecurity, it seems, is inevitable. But for the first time, I was really glad that I wasn't insecure and allowing something as arbitrary as a red balloon to lift me up the wrong ladder. As the night wrapped up, everyone started saying their goodbyes. At 9:30, woo, Saturday night bachelorette party. I said goodbye to the remaining women, and Megan called out, "I wish I had your life." That same rallying cry that I had called to the dominatrix all those years ago. I wondered who she had called it to. Hallmark card I've needed to buy that doesn't exist. Congratulations on your wedding, or your career, or your baby, or your divorce, or all of it, or none of it, or your decision to run away and go volunteer at a Weasel sanctuary. Congratulations on your one big, free, confined, heartbreaking, beautiful life, and doing whatever the hell you want to do with it. P.S. Please don't think of me when you wear these panties.